Hello friends, myself Subhash Nagarse from Sri Digambar Jain Gurukul High School, Solapur. I shall welcome to all of you in this session of 10th Science and Technology Part 1st. The topic is Gravitation Part 2. Today we are going to discuss on Kepler's laws and Newton's universal law of gravitation. Let us start. Friends, you know that in the previous session of the Gravitation Part 1st, we have been discussed with gravitation, force and motion, circular motion and centripetal force. Today in this session, we are going to discuss on the following important subtopics of this chapter. Kepler's laws, those are Kepler's first law, Kepler's second law, Kepler's third law, and Newton's universal law of gravitation. So friends, these are the important subtopics that we are going to deal today. These Kepler's laws are very important as far as future studies concerned. At the same time, Newton's universal law of gravitation is also important. Let us study deep. So friends, Kepler's law, we'll see. Planetary motion had been observed by astronomers since ancient times. Before Galileo, all observations of the planets' positions were made with naked eyes. By the 16th century, a lot of data were available about planetary positions and the motion. This Johannes Kepler studied this data. He noticed that the motion of planets follow certain laws. He stated 3 laws describing planetary motion. So these are nothing but Kepler's laws, which are given below. Let us see this before going to start with Kepler's law. Do you know that an ellipse is the curve obtained when a cone is cut by an inclined plane? You can see in the adjoining figure. It has 2 focal points. The sum of the distance to the 2 focal points from every point on the curve is constant, f1 and f2 are the 2 focal points of this ellipse shown in the figure 1.3. If A, B and C are 3 points on the ellipse, then we can write that AF1 plus AF2 is equal to BF1 plus BF2 is equal to CF1 plus CF2. From this figure, we come to know this one. Kepler's first law. The orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci. Figure 1.4 shows the elliptical orbit of a planet revolving around the sun. The position of the sun is indicated by S. Now, Kepler's second law. The line joining the planet and the sun sweeps equal areas in equal intervals of time. Second law is the line joining the planets and the sun sweeps equal areas in equal intervals of time. Here you can see. Here from the first law, the orbit of a planet is an ellipse. The shape is ellipse, orbital ellipse shape with the sun at the one of the foci. Secondly, the line joining the planet and the sun sweeps equal areas in equal intervals of time. Here you can see the shaded regions that has been areas swept by the planet during this revolution in the orbital elliptical orbit. Friends, here AB and CD are distances covered by the planet in equal time. Here it is AB as well as CD. After equal in intervals of time, the positions of the planets starting from A and C are shown by B and D respectively. The straight line AS and CS sweep equal area in equal interval of time. That is area ASB, this one, and area CSD, this one, are equal. So this Kepler's second law holds good for this. Now Kepler's third law. The square of its period of a revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of the planet from the sun. Listen once again. The square of its period of revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of the planet from the sun. Thus, if r is the average distance of the planet from the sun, r is the average distance from the sun of this planet, and t is the period of revolution, then we can write that t square is directly proportional to r raised to 3, r cube. That is, in order to remove this proportionality sign, we have to take the constant. That constant is k, so it can be written as t square upon r cube is equal to constant, which is k, equation 1. This is the mathematical representation of Kepler's third law. Kepler obtained these laws simply from the study of the position of the planets explained by regular observations. He had no explanation as to why planets obey these laws. He will see below how these laws helped Newton in the formulation of his theory of gravitation. So friends, here use your brain power. How? See, if the area ESF in figure 1.4, this one is equal to area ASB, what will you infer about EF? Friends, here according to Kepler's second law, if area of ESF is equal to area of ASB, this ASB and this ESF, then AB and EF are distances covered by the planet in the same time. But the distance AB is much larger than the distance EF. This means the planet has to move faster between A and B than it does between E and F. As a result, the planet moves faster in its orbit near the Sun A to B and comparatively slower than when it is further away from the Sun E to F. The distance from A to B contains the point at which the planet is closest to the Sun. This point is known as perihelion. The distance from E to F contains the point at which the planet is farthest from the Sun. This point is known as the aphelion. Now, Newton's universal law of gravitation. All the above considerations, including Kepler's laws, led Newton to formulate his theory of universal gravity. According to the theory, every object in the universe attracts every other object with a definite force. This force is directly proportional to the product of the masses of the two objects and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. So friends, here we can see the two objects whose masses are m1 and m2 and the distance between them is d. This 1.5 figure shows two objects here having the masses m1 and m2 and kept at a distance of d from each other. Mathematically, the gravitational force attract between these two bodies can be written as F is proportional to m1 m2 upon d square. Now we have to remove this proportionality sign, consider a constant z here. So F is equal to z m1 m2 upon d square, second equation. Friends, here z is the constant of proportionality and is called as universal gravitational constant. Here z is the universal gravitational constant. So the above law means that if the mass of one object is doubled, the force between the two objects also doubles. Also, if the distance is doubled, the force decreases by a factor of 4. If the two bodies are spherical, the direction of the force is always along the line joining the centers of the two bodies, and the distance between the centers is taken to be d. In case when the bodies are not spherical or have irregular shape, then the direction of force is along the line joining their centers of mass, and d is taken to be the distance between the two centers of mass. From the equation 2, it can be seen that the value of g is the gravitational force acting between the two unit masses kept at a unit distance away from each other. Thus, in SI units, the value of g is equal to the gravitational force between two masses of 1 kg kept 1 meter apart. So friends, the unit of g could be written as Newton meter square per kg square. The value of g was first experimentally measured by Henry Cavendish in SI units value is 6.673 into 10 to the power this minus 20 Newton meter square kg square or kg raised to minus 2. Friends, why did Newton assume inverse square dependence on distance in his law of gravitation? He was helped by Kepler's third law in this, as you can show here. Newton had assumed inverse square dependence on distance in his law of gravitation by considering Kepler's third law, which states that the square of orbital period of revolution of the planet around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of the planet from the sun. That is, t square is directly proportional to the r cube. So let us see this, how it could be shown. Inverse uniform circular motion or magnitude of a centripetal force. So consider an object moving in a circle with constant speed. We have seen earlier that such a motion is possible only when the object is constantly acted upon by force directed towards the center of the circle. This force is nothing but the centripetal force. If m is the mass of the object and v is the speed and r is the radius of the circle, then it can be shown that this force is equal to F, which is equal to mv square upon r. Friends, if a planet is revolving around the sun in a circular orbit, the uniform circular motion, then the centripetal force acting on the planet towards the sun must be F is equal to mv square upon r, where you can write here m is the mass of the planet and v is the speed and r is the distance from the sun. So friends, the speed of the planet can be expressed in terms of the period of revolution at t and is as follows. First, that the distance traveled by the planet in the revolution is equal to perimeter of the orbit, that is 2 pi r, and r is the radius of the planet from the sun. Time taken is equal to period of revolution, that is t. So this velocity v is distance traveled upon total time taken. Distance traveled is nothing but this perimeter 2 pi r upon time taken is capital T. So we have now F is equal to mu square upon r, that we already know. So now substitute the value of v here. So m into 2 pi r upon t bracket is to square upon here r. Therefore, this could be written as after solving this bracket, we are getting 4 m 2 pi r bracket square means 4 pi square r square. Here it will be m as it is 4 and t square it will come. Here r square from the numerator and r from the denominator get cancels, only left is r. So 4m pi square r upon t square. Multiplying and dividing both side by this r square, what you are getting F is equal to 4m pi r square upon r square. So which is equal to r cube upon t square according to this Kepler's third law. T square upon r cube is equal to k, constant. So F is equal to 4m pi square upon r square into k, but 4m pi square upon k is a constant. So friends, thus Newton concluded that the centripetal force, which is the force acting on the planet and is responsible for the circular motion, must be inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the planet and the sun. Newton identified this force with the force of gravity and hence postulated the inverse square law of gravitation. So the gravitational force is much weaker and other forces in nature, but it controls the universe and decides the future. This is possible because the huge masses of planets, stars, and other constituents of the universe. So friends, again use your brain power. Is there a gravitational force between the two objects kept on a table of between you and your friend sitting next to you? If yes, why don't the two move towards each other? An introduction to the scientist. So friends, here Johannes Kepler, who born in 1571, passed away in 1630, was a German astronomer and a mathematician. He started working as a helper to the famous astronomer Tycho Brahe in Prague in 1600. After the sudden death of this Brahe in 1601, Kepler was appointed as the royal mathematician in his place. Kepler used the observations of planetary positions made by the Brahe to discover the laws of planetary motion. He wrote several books. His work was later used by the Newtons in postulating his law of gravitation. So friends, go through this with the textbook. Thank you for watching the video. We'll meet in the next video.